I'd like to call the Whatcom PUD District Number 1 meeting to order. Thank you all for coming. The first item on our agenda is to approve the Pledge of Allegiance. So please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So let's move on to approval of the agenda. Now, are there any changes or modifications to the agenda?
Commissioner, I think we need to add the executive evaluation as part of the executive session.
Yes, are you, I mean, I know you're a little bit under the weather, Chris, you're fine to add that time and all of that?
I'm fine. I mean, the thing about that is mainly for me to get feedback from all of you anyway. So my condition is not as relevant.
Great. Okay, great. Any issues with that modification?
I was just gonna bring the same thing up. I will make a motion to approve the agenda with the addition of the executive evaluation during executive session.
I'll second.
Is there a motion and a second? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. So let's move on to the consent agenda. Under the consent agenda is the approval of the minutes for our regular meeting as well as our special meeting last week and claims for today.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
A second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. The next item on our agenda is public comment. We have wonderful folks here in the room and also online. And if you'd like to speak, please either in the room, please call up the microphone. Or if you're online, please indicate your desire to speak by raising your hand. Okay, we have a second public comment period towards the end of the meeting. If there's no hands raised or anyone in the room wants to speak, we'll move on. Let's move on to old business. So there's 4 items under old business, and the first one is a broadband update.
And I'd like to defer to Andrew to give us the update of the broadband. A lot's happening, and we should be giving you progress feedback virtually every meeting from now on. So Andrew, could you take it away?
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Give me 1 second. Okay, can you see this timeline here?
Pretty
Okay.
small. Could you zoom in a little bit?
Is that working?
No,
It's still quite small.
maybe also if you want, you can just talk to it, Andrew.
Okay, maybe I'll just do that then. So where we are in the process, we told you last time that we had heard back from the state broadband office that we were awarded funding for the Point Roberts fiber to the premise construction project, which is very exciting. The state still has to wait to receive those federal dollars before we can receive our contract with the state. And so that is expected to be happening in June. And so the start of our timeline assumes that we get our contract at some point in June. And since you can't see, I'll just kind of run through really high level. We'll begin with, your typical right-of-way acquisition. We'll go out to competitive bid for the design of the construction project. We'll move to prepare for permitting. There'll be some environmental and cultural resource review. In that design process, we'll go out and do electronic survey of the poles. I mean, everything that comes along with your basic telecommunications construction project in the planning phase. And that's leading up to the construction phase, which we think if everything goes as planned, and of course, this is very preliminary and draft, and timelines can shift, but we anticipate the planning to happen between June and the end of this year. And so moving into the beginning part of 2024, we'll be preparing for the construction phase of the project. That's like going out to bid, competitive bid for the actual construction of the infrastructure, because at that point we'll have the design, permitting in place, we'll be through environmental, and then we'll move through a long period of construction of about 6 or so months, and then we'll wrap up by the end of 2024. So by the beginning part of 2025, even if it shifted into 2025 a little bit, we'll say Q1 2025, the Point Roberts project will be fully online, and all 1,300 homes are connected, or those who decided to get service. So that's kind of high level timeline. Now, if things, if we don't get the contract with the state until July, then things get shifted. There's some wiggle room in this planning period for a material procurement, because there's been, during COVID, a year, actually leading up to COVID, there was about a year-long delay on some materials. But what we're hearing from the industry is that those timelines are starting to come down to a little bit. So it fluctuates like that. But we anticipate to give you updates, and you'll know if we're on track, and if we're not on track, we'll be able to give you a reason why as we move through this process. So you'll see this, and I'll make sure it's bigger next time for everyone. Apologize for that. And then I guess I'll also let you know, just to end, what we're also looking at is, and we're working with legal on this too, to compare the feasibility of doing an alternative to an IRU, which would be like a master services agreement. And so we're looking at how the two are different, and maybe we don't need to do an IRU. Maybe we can do a master services agreement. And I won't go through all the nuts and bolts of those right now, but we're looking at whether or not we can do something that's just slightly different than the IRU that meets our organizational needs. So kind of throwing a lot at you. I'm happy to take any questions, or if I missed anything, Chris. But that's my report. We're excited to get this project moving.
Questions, comments from the commission?
I'm sure there'll be lots of questions as we get into the details in the coming months, but just great to get an overview for now of where we're going and the timeline.
I have two questions. First question is, what do you anticipate our first, as a commission, approvals will be about?
First commission approval would be
Mhm.
to accept the terms of the award.
And that'll be sometime at the end of June, I assume.
Yes, possibly July.
Okay.
And with the history of the state broadband office, it could even be longer. That's not a criticism. It's just that, sometimes these timelines, and it's out of their control is what I'm saying. So it can shift. But that would be the next thing that would be coming to you for approval.
Thank you.
Yeah, Commissioner, our submission of that for your approval is completely dependent on the state getting the contract over to us. So, as soon as we get it, we're going to be putting it in a format for you to have a look at it and approve it or not. But that's kind of, we have to have stuff like that built in the timeline so that it's there. We know it's there, and we can track when it changes. The part of Andrew's presentation you really couldn't see. There's a normal Gantt chart on the second page, which kind of shows your typical project management guidelines and scope, schedule, and budget, the things that you chase after as a project manager. That's all there. So I think we need to get that to you as just a regular update, probably monthly, and then you guys can see that.
The port's progress on the subject of broadband. Is that something that you want to update the commission today, or do you want to let Gina come in and give us an update of where the port is at on their efforts?
Well, I think that, since we meet with them weekly, the construction is just going on with their current project, and they're getting closer to a first light date, which we think is going to be sometime in June, where they're actually going to have a lit customer. So they're moving. We don't know when exactly they're going to get that first light day, but it's they're pretty excited. They're getting close.
And then, of course, I think we all know, but it's maybe good to mention here in the meeting that the port just missed the window for funding from the state broadband line. That's correct, right?
That is correct. They were the next project down that wasn't funded.
And do you know if that project is going to be resubmitted under BEAD or other vehicles for funding?
Well, I think, from our perspective on the broadband steering committee, that was a very good project, and it was submitted for all the right reasons. And I would expect that it gets resubmitted on BEAD or CREB or any of the different programs that are going to come up, or anything out of the Washington State Broadbanding Office. So the short answer is yes, and kind of the longer answer is it may be broken down into parts. It may be a whole thing. We're just not sure exactly how Gina wants to approach that, but we'll help her in any way we can.
And I guess what I'm really getting at with the second group of questions is regarding broadband equity and access deployment BEAD. Is I would love to get now an update on where we are, where is our next step as far as public funding, and that's really what I'm getting at. Is obviously this just happened. We've got to make sure we put the pieces in place to execute under this grant award. But then the questions that immediately come to mind for me as a commissioner is, what are we planning as far as filling the next gap? And of course, we're doing that rightfully so jointly with the port. And so what comes to my attention is now taking advantage of the opportunity to revisit things, lessons learned regarding our IRUs, who retains ownership of the digital infrastructure at the end of 25 years, for example. Those are important questions. And what are the next gaps that we're trying to fill? So I'll leave those questions with you, but I would love to get an update soon on those subjects to the commission.
So I think that the port's adoption of an IRU that has some change of ownership of the asset at the end of time is the port's call. That's different than what we're proposing. In addition to that, the port is going to resubmit all or part of the project they've got. We're going to help them identify more. We have two projects that did not get funded, and they did not score as highly as the port's project. So, clearly we've got kind of more powder that we're holding dry. But we're also going to take a look at what comes out of the digital equity work and see if there are additional areas that we need to expand into in terms of building a proposed project. I will tell you that we couldn't tell exactly how the scoring went, but one thing that did appear to be kind of heavily weighting on it is the cost per pass. And unfortunately, a lot of our projects now are getting to be where they're very, very expensive. And the state will direct money at places where they can reach more unserved customers with the same amount of money. So, that's one of the things we're running into now is all our easy projects have been done.
So with the two projects that didn't get funded, Ravens Crest, and what was the name? What were we calling the other project?
Yeah.
It was the Glacier project.
Oh, yeah. So, I know for sure with the Raven Crest community, they wanted to see if they could get these state dollars as option A. And then we had discussed some option Bs with them. Have we followed up with, I know Eric Alm was sort of the community organizer for Ravens Crest. Have we not closed the loop, but, obviously let them know, and, what are we discussing an LUD model with them, or is there any more support that the PUD can provide to them as they look to next steps, excuse me.
So I know Andrew communicated with them immediately. The day of that we found out. So that was done right away. And I believe that he was setting up a meeting with them to discuss LUDs or what they wanted us to do. And Andrew, I'll kick it over to you.
That's exactly right. We did let them know immediately that the award was not funded, or the project was not funded. And there is they did express interest in moving forward with an LUD, or that they'd be interested in pursuing that, the feasibility of that. So that's next in line.
Okay, so will we be getting an update about a possible LUD program design in the next weeks or months? Or I know we spent quite a bit of time last summer looking at the LUD model. Yeah, what can we expect from the commission in terms of next steps on this LUD model?
Well, I think the first thing we got to determine is that the community itself is behind it. We know
Mhm.
Eric Alm is, but you know,
Right.
this requires the majority of the landowners to agree. And so we're
Mhm.
going to have to get that community together, spell out for them what it would mean for each of them, and get them to agree that, yeah, we'll do it. And then we've got to get a design. At that point, we would bring it back to you guys for consideration.
Okay,
So I think, you know, we're probably a month or two away from really having anything we can show you. And
okay,
at that, it's going to be more of an update. And then obviously we'll have to work with Annette and figure out the financing if we go with an LUD route and what that would look like. And that would require your authorization. And, you know, there's a bunch of different steps that have to happen there.
great. Thanks for the update.
And is that the same window for a BEAD to broadband equity and access deployment that we'll hear back? As far as your plans?
I'm sorry, I couldn't quite hear your question.
The question is that, so there is this funding, I believe it's at the end of the summer. I'm not sure, I thought it was August or July, where there will be solicitations and an opportunity to apply for funding for BEAD. And so when will we hear the plans on that?
Well, the solicitation that's happening at BEAD, I think, is at the state level to the feds. And so there won't be anything for us to apply for until sometime next year, probably middle to end of next
Okay.
year.
Thank
So
you.
that one's a ways off. There are other fundings though. There's CURB and I forget, there's one other state project that may or may not directly apply, but you know, it's again on the Ravenscrest, the cost per pass is so high. Those probably would not score well.
Okay.
And Glacier possibly.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I misunderstood. I thought that the application from the state to the federal was something that was relevant to us. I mean, it is relevant to us, but we won't be applying for a specific project until next year.
Yeah, I think that, Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong on my understanding of that BEAD funding, but that's the entire digital equity effort that we've been involved in is being rolled up as part of that. And it's presented at the state level to the federal government. And that's sometime this summer.
Correct. And in addition to that, if I may, we've talked a little bit, months ago about the new maps and the new data, and they're releasing the version 2 of that at the in June or the end of May, and then NTIA will use that to allocate to all the states just the dollar amount that each state will receive, and that will be happening throughout this year. And so, as Chris said, we won't see anything coming down the pipe until next year, late next year, possibly even the following. So things are really moving right now, but in terms of a direct application for us to apply for additional dollars, that's a ways out. But there are CURB and Public Works Board funding agencies that we could pursue potentially later this year.
Okay. Any more discussion on the broadband update? Let's move on to the, thank you, Andrew.
Thanks.
Let's move on to the adjudication update.
I don't have anything significant at the moment. I would say that I have spoken to Robin McPherson and Bill Clark. Robin McPherson with the Department of Ecology, Bill Clark, the Ag Board. In response to some of Robin's earlier requests that I organize a CLE for local lawyers and local Whatcom County Bar Association. We are doing that. We're going to target sometime in September for that. Likely be the first. The bar meets the first Wednesday or Tuesday of the month, so it could be in early September. We non-bar people will be allowed, but it'll be advertised just to the bar, and I'll let you know.
Could I just chime in here? This might be something we should put on the agenda for a future meeting, and I don't want to create scope creep here, but I think that with adjudication happening, it does seem like there's a lot of sort of this like wait and see attitude towards some of our projects in the basin. And I gave Steve a call yesterday because I was wanting to get an update on where we were going with the phase 3 of the regional water supply plan. And I think what sort of made me think about this, and I believe all 3 of the commissioners got an email from Eric Hurst a few weeks ago related to the Water Smart grant program through the Bureau of Reclamation. And I just want to make sure that we are moving forward, identifying projects that we could apply for with grant funding sources like that, and not feeling like because we're in this state of transition in the basin, we're not able to apply for grant funding for projects. And I mean, I know there's a lot of coordination that's happening right now through the Watershed Management Board. So I think maybe what I'm asking is that at a future meeting, we get an update on what's going on with the next phase of the regional water supply plan, and sort of how we're identifying what our work plan is going forward. I know we have a pretty full agenda, so maybe now is not the time to do it, but that would be useful for me. I don't know if the other 2 commissioners would also find that useful at a future meeting.
I would.
Yeah, not today, I don't think. It's a
Nope.
good idea. One other thing I had was, we're going to bring Sarah Mack and Matt Wells, I was gonna say Matt Tupper, and I know about it. Sometime in late September for kind of an executive session adjudication overview. So I have some dates from them. It'll be probably a 3-hour, I'm gonna guess, workshop, so an all morning or all afternoon. So look at, and for them, I think it's Tuesday. Probably the best days are Tuesday, Thursday, or Friday, last half of September. So let me know what are the best dates for you. And this would be an executive session meeting.
So anywhere during the last
2 weeks,
2 or 3 weeks.
2 weeks of
So
September.
starting the 18th of
Yeah, say
September.
the 18th of September on Tuesday, Thursday, or Friday, morning or afternoon. The morning's better for Commissioner Deshmani. You don't have to respond to this moment, but shoot me an email.
Mornings are never better for me.
Yeah.
And I would just add that this is one that we probably want to restrict to an in-person meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, we might need to
If
do
we
some
push into
more,
October, we can push to October.
kind of, yeah. Look, should we just email John?
Just email me the-
offline? Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
we don't need a schedule here in the meeting. And if September's not working, we'll push to October.
So, but that, let's proceed. Anything else on the adjudication update?
No,
I've made a note to follow up with Chris regarding the regional water supply.
Thank
Get it
you.
On the agenda.
great.
Which not figure out. Item number C. Sorry, I didn't listen. Is there any more comments on the adjudication update? Commissioner Net? No, okay. So let's move on to 5C, the future of the lower Snake River dams.
Yeah, do you want me to start this?
Sure.
Okay, so we had a conversation at our March 28th meeting about our membership in the Northwest River Partners. And I think I'll just start with that. In the agenda packet, there's 2 memos from me. And I made a motion in our March 28th meeting to cancel our Northwest River Partners membership, and we decided to delay it. And so I wrote this memo to provide some more background on the organization and why I felt like it didn't make sense for us to be a part of it. we currently spend $6,000 a year on this membership, and I think the memo speaks for itself. It's a political advocacy organization that I think is sort of contributing to more conflict around the lower Snake River dams rather than dialogue, which is what we need. And so I just welcome a discussion now about what, both of your perspectives on our membership in this political advocacy organization.
Commissioner Arnett.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in favor of not renewing our membership after, having some time to review who they are as a group. I don't think that their work aligns with our mission or our strategic plan. So I don't think it's, good for us to be giving them so much money per year. So I would be in favor of not renewing our membership.
I'm confused with the language there. Favor of
Not renewing.
not renewing. Okay. Thank you. I thought I heard removing. So I was confused. Okay, so yeah, and I would agree with that. I have slightly different reasons. And it really has to do with Northwest River Partners. Since my time as a commissioner and my reading of their materials is communicating information that whether it's fully substantiated or not, and I have some issues with some of the press releases and comments that have been made by Northwest River Partners. But I don't even need to debate that. My main concern is not whether they are the actual communications are substantive. It's more that they don't communicate anything new. There's no net value add to the PUD by having them as someone we provide funding to. Public Power Council has much more depth, and other organizations that we are part of have much more meaningful, thoughtful commentary, even some of which I disagree with, but I value that commentary independent of whether I agree with it. So for that reason, I think we should eliminate our membership of Northwest River Partners.
Before we make a motion, I would also just like to make sure that as an organization, membership in organizations, especially political advocacy organizations, always come before the commission. In reviewing notes, it does not look like this was a membership decision that came before the commission. And so I do think that it's really important that, these are policy decisions, these memberships. And so that's what I'm hoping we have in the future.
Yeah, and I'm going to take the bullet on this one.
Oh, okay.
And I was a commissioner at the time that we started our Northwest River.
Oh, and did it
Steve
come?
brought it to the commission.
Oh,
and,
okay.
The thing is that all I could say was a new commissioner. And it's not a choice that I understood well. So at the time I was open to hearing what they had to say, and we heard what they had to say.
Okay. Okay. So it did. I thought that I went through all the notes and didn't find anything on this, but.
Commissioners, I think it's also I think it's called out individually in the budget every year.
It is.
Yeah.
Line
And I
item.
missed that too in the claims, and Chris I asked for when it was, and all three of us approved claims in January with them on there. So it's a good wake up call for me just be asking more questions. So does somebody want to make a motion, or should I?
I'll make the motion. Since I was a commissioner during the time that we made the approval, I'll make a motion to we discontinue our.
Oh,
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I don't know if this was adopted by motion. I could just take a head nod from the three of you and we just not renew it. And, it's, I don't have a vested interest one way or the other. I'm happy to not spend $6,000 any day of the week.
I'm fine with, I think the requested action says terminate the Northwest River Partners membership and not renew. And the only reason I found out we were members is by looking on their website and seeing that the Whatcom PUD was a member, which was surprising to me. So I would appreciate, Chris, if you could communicate with their executive director that we are no longer going to be members, and I'd be fine with us not being listed as members currently. As of,
Yeah, I have no trouble sending a note to them this afternoon. I can make that happen. Now, whether or not
Okay.
they respond by immediately pulling us off their website, that I don't know. But
So I would just say, just for the record, if you're terminating existing membership that the commission approved, that should be a commission vote, because it's an existing membership you approved. If you're not renewing it, it would just not go in your budget. And then that's where you would not take an action at this time or ever, and Chris just wouldn't put it in the budget. But if you want to take affirmative action now, that needs to be a commission motion.
thank you, John.
So I'll return my motion. I'd like to make a motion that we terminate our relationship with Northwest River Partners as
and not renew.
and not renew. Terminate the Northwest River Partners membership and not renew.
And I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I guess I do have some further discussion because there were memos flying back and forth and
I want to speak to that too.
yeah, Atul, you had sent something to the commission and it was interesting because it felt like we were having a discussion.
I was gonna address that after the motion for the benefit of the public. So I'll explain that. Christine's original memo came to Chris, who then put it in the packet so that it was available to public. It was not a communication from Commissioner Grant directly to the commission outside of any kind of public forum. It was all out front and transparent in that memo was sent to Chris to distribute to the commissioners in the packet. And then Commissioner Deshmani, having seen the packet, had wanted to respond by memo, sent that to Chris, a response, who then put that in a memo to be included as a supplement to the packet. So these communications did not occur outside of a meeting or outside of a communication, serial meeting type of thing, outside of an open notice meeting. These were all included in the packet, and we felt that was sufficient for dissemination and compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act.
Also, can I just say one more thing?
And I would
This
say
is a
Commissioner Deshmani
two-part-
checked with us first before doing that.
This is a two-part conversation. So there's there were two action memos. There was the Northwest River Partners membership. And then the second one, which is just I think we called it the future of the Lower Snake River dams discussion. So I was thinking we would take action on our Northwest River Partners membership and then have a discussion about the two questions which I posed to the commission, essentially about whether we should take a stance on the Lower Snake River dams or consider an adoption of a resolution. So I thought we could take care of this Northwest River Partners membership question first and then move to that discussion.
Yeah, that sounds great. And I just want to back it up to what John was talking about, though, just as the person that didn't submit a memo, that having a memo sent and then having a rebuttal or like more information to that memo, whether or not it was done, included in the packet, it seemed like we should be having that discussion in person, because I'm looking at that and I'm like, should I send a memo about what my stance is? Do you know what I mean? Like I would, in the future, commissioners, I would prefer that, like, even if a memo is sent and we have something to say about that memo, that we just keep that to the meeting, instead of, adding additional things to the packet because we have rebuttals or more information that we think needs to get added. Does that make sense? Otherwise, I'm reading Christine's memo and I'm like, great, we're gonna have a good discussion. And then I'm reading Atul's memo and I'm like, okay, so he seems to be starting the conversation before the conversation has started. That's all I'm saying. Whether it was done correctly, I just would prefer that we have these conversations during our meeting. instead of, included in the agenda packet.
I'll respond, but I'd like to pass this motion first. I'll address that, but unless you think it's pertinent to pass the motion, I'd like to discuss
Okay,
it.
let's pass the motion.
So the motion in a second, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Did I get an aye from you, Amy?
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
Right, so we have 3 ayes, motion passes. So, just to clarify, in my original email to Chris, I said, I don't think that, we should go to the whole commission. I asked him to print it so that it would be printed and available for the commission. And I assumed you'd be in person or somehow disseminated to you on the day of the commission meeting. So as to avoid that. Chris then decided to include it as in the packet, which was his discretion. And then I asked Chris to double check with John. And then John got involved and double checked. And I don't, well, I'm gonna use this language. I usually don't like to use it. I don't disagree with you, Jamie. Which means that I had the same feeling when I wrote my response. It was for the education from my perspective and my inputs to the commission. I was putting my thoughts to paper. And I was thinking that they weren't so complex that I couldn't present those thoughts on the day of the commission meeting. If I had a technical memo, I would have made sure that the technical memo was not a quote unquote a response to Commissioner Grant's communication, but more a background kind of communication. So
Right.
I think it's a good concern and I support it fully, and I did my best ahead of time to avoid it. So.
Great. Thank you. And I bring that up mostly because I do have things that I want to say about what you had sent, Atul, and I didn't think it would be prudent for me to write a memo in response to, Commissioner Deshmani's memo. Do you know what I mean? Like what we're doing
Yes,
is stimulating
completely.
and it's all happening wrong, in my opinion. So one of the things, and I just wanted you to clarify, you said in your memo that our local constituent groups do not currently have a position on this. And I wholeheartedly disagree. I think there are constituent groups in Whatcom County, especially in my district, that have stated very clearly that they have an opinion on the lower Snake River dams. Lummi Nation Carvers even sent a totem pole in support of removing the lower Snake River dam. So I wanted you to clarify what constituent groups you were speaking of.
Sure. So I had the opportunity several years ago to speak to several Lummi Tribal Council leaders, and what they told me, and I got confirmed again at the first salmon ceremony, was that they feel deeply on a individual level the importance of Chinook on the Snake River. However, as it comes to political positioning, they feel what's even more important is to respect the tribes that exist along the Snake River and give them primacy. And those tribes have chosen not to take a position on this subject. And therefore, for that reason, the Lummi Nation, out of deference to those tribes, has chosen to not take a formal position. And I asked point blank to the tribal chair, well, what do you think? What are your thoughts about what the PUD should do? Well, I mean, he said, you can follow our lead. Interestingly, on the weekend, there was an environmental caucus meeting there. Where an individual who works for the Nooksack tribe mentioned that the Nooksack tribe had previously taken a position on the subject. But even in their position, they repeat this point of tribal sovereignty, and it would be their interest to take a supporting position to the tribes of the lower Snake Rivers. So when we were a very different commission when I became a commission. And the point I raise is that it is to some degree a distraction for the PUD to get involved in a policy issue that is relatively distant from our community, and the impacts of participating in a controversial subject are myriad. And it would be beneficial to not participate where we can't have a significant influence, just for the sake of weighing in on a controversial issue. It has a minor impact on our mix. And although we might please some people, we might upset some people at the same time, taking a position on the subject. So can I be heard better now?
Oh, so much better. I've been struggling. Yes.
So I think I concluded my thoughts.
Can I go next? So I have heard from also local constituent groups, like members of the local chapters of Trout Unlimited. Also, you know, Whatcom County has roughly 1,700 direct jobs supported by the commercial fishing industry, and hundreds of more that are indirectly supported by the commercial fishing industry. So, you know, restoring Snake River salmon to fishable levels does have an economic benefit to Whatcom County. And so I think unlike some of our sister PUDs that do not have that commercial fishing industry, it is quite important to us. So I did just want to share that. I also had a fairly long conversation with Representative Deborah Lekanoff yesterday morning, who is a tribal member. And, you know, I think just wanting to clarify some of the statements that I heard from her on this issue from the YRO1 Environmental Caucus. And what she communicated to me was that she did feel like it would be important to, you know, for the PUD to weigh in on this, because the public power community has been so vocal on this issue. And I think her conversation helped frame some ideas for me. I agree. I don't think that we want to, in reflection on the Clallam Commission resolution, which I included in my memo for background, and I hope you two were able to read it. In conversations with both Chris and John Sitkin, I don't think that a resolution to that degree is appropriate. But I would say that I think that there are some sort of simple statements that thread the needle that I think that we all could agree on. And I'm willing to share 3 ideas that I have, but I want to keep the discussion going before I share those.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, so I am, just after asking my question, my clarifying question, I am supportive of us taking a stance on the lower Snake River dams. It's, for me, it's a complicated issue. I think for everybody, it's a complicated issue. I worked in the commercial fishing industry for a number of years. I grew up in it. I know that there's local constituents groups that are definitely pro taking down the Snake River dams. I know that because I worked in the industry. One of the things that I'm concerned about with removing Snake River dams, and I think, you know, Governor Inslee and Patty Murray, that they had it right, that you know, the loss of salmon is death by 1,000 cuts. That's what everybody likes to say. So it's going to take 1,000 solutions to fix it. We know that removing the lower Snake River dams will allow fish access to fresh cold water. But one of the main issues for salmon is climate change. And so unless those dams are replaced with something that's not contributing, to more greenhouse gases, unless it's clean energy, then we've, at best made a lateral move, at worst we've gone backwards. And we've seen that in fishing before, the cormorants were killing salmon along the Columbia River. So everybody's like, we got to get rid of the cormorants. So they started oiling their eggs and trying to get them to move, and they moved 7 miles upstream and ended up killing more salmon. So it's like, we make these moves and then we have these really negative consequences. I just want to say that I am in support of lowering or removing the lower Snake River dams, but I think that clearly we need to be able to replace that energy with good, clean energy as well. So thank you for clarifying a tool that you had spoken with. It sounds like Chairman Hilaire and his personal position on that. That's good to hear. Thanks.
Yeah, and I want to say there's nothing about my communication today that's intended to be me putting my foot down about any particular position. Remember that I was holding back the dam of a decision that was likely to be for the PUD to vote in favor of supporting the Snake River dams. At that time, the do no harm clause in the political realm was an effective way for me to accomplish a position that I think would have been damaging to our PUD, and particularly as it relates to certain relationships, for us to take a pro-dams stance, pro-Snake River dam stance. And I continue to believe about the Snake River dams is that the way to look at those dams is part of a portfolio. And to look at the entire hydro system as a portfolio. And when you have a portfolio, you're not, part of that philosophy is to not be excessively attached to anything in your portfolio. The goal is to optimize a portfolio, not a particular asset in the portfolio. And so what does that mean? That means that you look at every option to increase power production, perhaps retrofitting and upgrading turbines that are on existing dams. That could mean putting turbines on dams that are currently not generating energy, that have additional capacity to expand. That means factoring in the methane impacts of shallow dams, which the Snake River dams are shallow dams. Or look when the dams are producing power. Do they produce the power when they're most valued? One of the challenges of the Snake River dams is that they produce their highest power typically where it's least needed. So these are all things to factor into a portfolio management approach. And people in every political persuasion, and certainly I'm sure I've done it, have embraced issues like slippery slope issues. And I know that I'm not going to change the world. People are not going to stop thinking slippery slope type of thinking, meaning that if you do this, then you're going to take it all. But I think it's destructive to solving some of the most challenging problems of our day. And I think the public park community is treating the Snake River dams as a slippery slope issue. And there's plenty I could poke at environmentalists in this way. And I'm sure fishermen, and I can have everybody dislike me because I challenge their particular slippery slope thinking. But the point is we all do it. And I'd like us to try not to do it as much as possible.
Can I go next? Okay, thank you. So I have also, this is a very complex issue, and I think it is not black and white, it's gray. And I appreciate what both of you have said. And Jamie, in your comments about this climate is one of the biggest threats to salmon as well, and we need to be decarbonizing as quickly as possible. And so I've had conversations about this issue with the Save Our Wild Salmon folks, American Rivers, Trout Unlimited, and one of the things that I have brought up is we need firm baseload power to run our electric grid. And renewables are great, but we don't have good long duration storage options right now. And the next Nobel Prize will go to whoever figures that out, but it hasn't happened yet. And so if we are going to take out our thermal generation plants, coal and natural gas, and we're going to remove a few of these dams that are critical to salmon habitat. Again, we're not going to go down the slippery slope of taking all 31 dams out, but we need to acknowledge that that will probably mean building new nuclear. And I have said that to members of these organizations, which, you know, I would consider these environmental organizations. And I had a good conversation with Deborah Lacanoff about it, Representative Deborah Lacanoff from the 40th LD, and actually got her in touch with Energy Northwest political Josh Lozano, who's their political advocacy government affairs director. And she's going to be going out to do a tour in a few months and has been part of this nuclear caucus. And I just think that we need to understand that we need to be pragmatic about that. We are facing painful trade-offs with rapid decarbonization and trying to save salmon. And it's not going to be easy. And we need to try to find the middle path together. And so, you know, I also, so I perhaps foolishly signed up for there's a US government listening session on Thursday related to the Columbia River Basin. Waputa sent reminders out about it. I've gotten reminders from other organizations in the environmental community, and they're limited slots. I logged in and got one. So I have a 3-minute speaking slot on Thursday, and I'm not quite sure what I'm going to say, but I have thought a lot about this issue. And yesterday afternoon, I wrote down what I think are just kind of 3 simple statements that I believe, and I think maybe the 2 of you might agree with too. And if you 2 are okay with it, I was going to just read them. And tomorrow I could either say, these are my opinions only, this does not represent my commission, or I could say, this is something that I discussed with my commission and that, you know, we wanted to share at this listening session. So is it okay if I read those 3 statements right now?
Certainly.
Okay, so the first one is, one of Whatcom County's key industries is fishing, commercial fishing. Restoring Snake River salmon to fishable numbers is an economic benefit to Whatcom County and our entire region. Number 2, we see a path to restore a free-flowing Snake River with minimal rate impacts on Northwest Public Power ratepayers. That path will require significant federal financial support. 3, we support the planning underway to find solutions to replace the clean energy, irrigation, and transportation services of the 4 lower Snake River dams.
I
see
agree
no
with
issue.
those.
Yeah,
Okay, so I mean, I think that this is threading the needle. And I think this thing about the federal financial support, you know, Representative Stimson from Idaho is Senator, sorry, you know, these dams are not going to go down unless we have some sort of a big financial package passed at the federal level to help support, you know, all the services offered by the dams. And I do think that the public power community is putting ourselves in a less effective negotiation role because of how extreme we've been on this issue.
right. For example, the first meeting that Jamie attended at the Waputa and the board of directors meeting on Friday, where we brought it to the commission. Jamie and I brought it to the commission, where there was actually a sentence that said that fish are not declining, something like that, you know, which is a preposterous statement. And so it does more harm to the public park community to say things that are unsubstantiated like that than so I support those comments.
Okay.
Chris,
I do too. Chris has a comment, but I'll come back after Chris says something.
oh, thank you, Jane.
So I know I don't really have a place in the policy discussion, but I do want to say that, first of all, if I turn my muting off, can you guys hear me?
Yeah,
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes,
So whenever I look at these issues, I first ask, how does this help or hurt our current customers, not our community, but the folks we actually sell power and water to? And I'm reminded of Commissioner Dashmani's comments that he made a year and a half ago, and also echoed in his note that we're kind of small players in this on the one hand. On the other hand, and this goes back to what Christine put in the 3 comments, if we don't have significant federal help in terms of replacing the power that's generated at the Snake River dams, then we will have rate shock, because as Commissioner Dashmani pointed out, it is a portfolio. If you go to the efficient frontier of the portfolio, you land on this thing called a cone, or a cost of new entry. And basically what that does is it pushes the incremental cost of power towards the cone in the portfolio. Well, that's a fancy way of saying that rates are going to go up sharply. And you know, you're looking at needing 4,000 plus megawatts of power just to replace the Snake River dams and do current electrification. And when you think about electrifying all of the buildings and all of the transportation and everything else, you know, you're looking at building an awful lot of new power at the margin. And what's at the margin will have different costs depending on when and where it's built. But a lot of it's going to be built in the 2030s and 2040s. So all that to be said, I do support those 3 statements. I think it's an elegant way to finesse the issue. And just don't lose sight of the fact that if we don't have federal help for this stuff, we will have rate shock in the Pacific Northwest, and we'll be part of that.
and we can't go through an energy transition if we're in an energy crisis. So, well, so do we need to make a motion, John, or could I just send these to Ann so that they're in the notes, or?
It's not a formal position of the PUD until
we make it until we make it.
until
So
you make it so. So at this point, you can say, I've shared these comments with the commission at our meeting, and there's general support. We haven't passed a resolution.
Okay, so because we would have to write this into a resolution to make it. a
and
resolution.
I'd like to have a little bit of time still
Okay.
to because I'm a commissioner in evolution. Let's put it that way. I just remember that it was just a couple of years ago that you know, things are different.
So on
Um,
Thursday, you 2 are comfortable with me sharing these statements and saying that I've shared these with my commission and we support these generally, although we have not passed a resolution to support these statements. And then if we want to formalize it, they'll be in the notes and we can have another discussion later about it. Does that seem like a good pathway forward?
And it'd be good if
Yeah.
you could share with Ann or myself, just those.
Yeah.
I didn't write it down, so.
Yeah.
I got them.
Christine, I have a feeling that you're probably going to have to clarify number 1 to some people. Because and this came up at Waputa. Somebody had said, you know, I had mentioned salmon, she had said, well, you're in Whatcom County, like you're unaffected by
Right.
Snake River salmon. So to be clear with people, Snake River salmon don't stay in the Snake River, and Whatcom County fishermen don't stay in our harbors, right? So, and I think that's important for people to understand that, like, these salmon are certainly part of our economic game here in Whatcom County also. So I don't know if there's a way that we can clarify that, if it matters, but there is just a lack of information around how salmon work. I think in
So
general.
salmon swim to
Yeah,
other
salmon
places.
swim. Up and down the-
Fisherman motor to other places.
Yeah. And
Maybe I can get some toys that I can.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
I'll try to, yeah.
I know that it sounds silly, but it's one of those things that it seems like it always comes up. People are like, that doesn't affect you, but it really does. Like, fishermen here are fishing for those salmon. And Chris, I just
I
wanted to say something before I just shut up. You know, you had mentioned, we're small players, that's true. And, you had mentioned about not wanting to take action that, you know, doesn't sort of speak to our ratepayers. I'm paraphrasing. But I also wanted to point out that the commission is not elected by ratepayers. Like we're elected by members of the public. And so we don't just serve ratepayers. And so our conversations are probably going to be a lot broader than the service of ratepayers. I don't know.
True. Yeah, and I'm not disagreeing with that. I just said the way that I measure it is by customers first, and then I
Yeah.
look at the whole community second. Just recognize that everything that we do here is paid for by our current customers, period.
Absolutely.
That's all.
Just for the purpose of full disclosure, I attended the first listening session a couple of months ago, as did Ken Hayes, and when I went to the PPC meeting in Portland, Scott knew that I listened to that. I mean, that I spoke at that meeting. He's listened to every listening session, and he'll listen to you too. And he kind of nudged me in the hallway and said, "So Atul, if you guys need power, how come you guys are speaking against the Snake River dams?" And I said, excellent point. But in my comments, I said that I'd let people know I was a commissioner, but I'm in no, and I also said I'm in no way speaking on behalf of the commission. So by you taking that next step, I think it'll be it's important that you do clarify that you've reviewed your comments with the commission. And in my comments, I said largely what I said here, which is I believe in a portfolio management approach. I believe that we need to work on replacing the power. We also need to recognize that there are carbon impacts and climate impacts by leaving the dams in place. To suggest that they're a carbon positive, solely a carbon positive, is a mistake, because shallow dams emit methane much more than, for example, the deep dams, like the Grand Coulee Dam, for example. And the reason is because it's colder at the bottom of the Grand Coulee Dam, and there's a lot more pressure. So there's a lot less methane evolved at the Grand Coulee Dam than there is at any of the Snake River dams, for example. So that has an impact. And of course, the nearshore environment, which is enabled by removing dams, a dramatically greater amount of nearshore environment is created when you remove dams. Everything you do to create habitat also creates more quote unquote nearshore environment. And the nearshore environment is adaptive and is able to provide forage and safety for salmon, which they need even more in a climate stressed environment. Whether we're talking about acidification of the ocean, nearshore environment is essential in those cases, and temperature effects in a warmer river. A nearshore environment also provides more sustenance to deal with greater temperatures. So I don't know exactly how the carbon accounting works out for the Snake River dams, but I'm just saying is that something that hasn't been taken into consideration is the carbon. There are some carbon benefits associated with removal too. So to say it's only a win in the carbon column wouldn't be accurate.
Well, thanks for this discussion. It's a really challenging issue, and I'll share these comments at the listening session on Thursday.
Yeah, thank you all. Is there any further discussion? Okay, let's move on to 5D, scheduling of an electric expansion feasibility study, open house in Bellingham.
So commissioners, if I may, when we set up our original public listening or hearing that we had on the feasibility study, if I just could remind you, we had some discussion about where to locate it. And the discussion centered on putting it in Ferndale for two reasons. One, it was kind of central to the county, and two, it was outside of Bellingham, so that it wasn't a Bellingham centric kind of thing. And that's why we scheduled it in Ferndale. And so we had that. A number of people from Bellingham did show up, and or at least one, Scott Lagaste, I know is from Bellingham, he showed up. So with that, my question to you is, do you want another hearing? My sense was one was enough. And if we have a hearing in Bellingham, you're going to get a whole bunch of people that simply want to socialize the electric system. And they really don't care about the cost.
Yes,
You do want one? Is that a yes for yes, I do want
Yes.
one? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I was still processing the comment from Chris. I talked to Chris about this. I think that if we do another open house, it should be in late fall or in the winter. If we do one in Bellingham. I think it should be after the mayoral election. Just to put it bluntly.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that Chris is right, that the people that are super passionate about public electric probably showed up to either the open house that we had in Ferndale, or they showed up at our meeting. I still think it would be nice to have one in Bellingham and hear what people have to say. I think anytime we can encourage the public to get involved in stuff we're doing, that's good. But I agree, definitely, if we do, we should probably put a pin in it and wait till after campaign season, because that could turn it into quite the circus.
Also, just so you know, on Thursday of I presented to the Whatcom County Climate Impacts Group and talked somewhat, they all read the report and we talked about it. I think a lot of the key constituents out there have either seen the report, talked to one of us or Chris, or come to our in-person open house. And I also think by kicking the can down the road another 6 months, we might have some more information to update our numbers. And I'm hoping that we don't need to do another entire feasibility study with EES. Chris, I know that you're good enough with numbers that it seems like as some of these key dials change, I hope that you at least can have kind of a ballpark understanding of whether something has changed significantly enough that it is changing the financials in a meaningful way. But that will be enough time and that we might have some new information.
So if I may, there are two main dials that I look at on this. The first is the power forward markets, and that will change over time, obviously. And within 6 months, I don't expect to see too much change on that, maybe a little bit. And the key would be for the power forward markets to come down in the 27, 28, 29 timeframe. Lately, they've been going up. The second thing is PSE's next rate filing. And I think that's going to be the real key. So that won't change until they file. And that's about 18 months off. So what I expect to have happen is about a year from now, I come back to the commission and say, okay, not a full-blown study, but a refresh by EES or another consultant of the model that we had. And let's have a look at that and try and time it so that it's right after Puget does their rate filing, and then we just kind of know what's what. But I think those are the two big dials. I don't expect a huge change between now and say December. There should be some on the forwards for the power market, but there's that won't be too big. That's more of a year over year kind of change. And then Puget files about every 24 months. They have a new rate case.
Should we put this on the agenda
So, yeah, I
again,
have some
late
thoughts.
fall?
I have some thoughts
Oh, okay,
first.
go.
So if I think about the central reason why I want to have another open house is because of the experience I have, not personally, but that I've gotten by way of spending time with prior and current Jefferson PUD commissioners, consultants, and people were in the community at the time. And what I got out of that is that the effort for municipalization in Jefferson started at least a decade before they municipalized. There were commissioners who were not on the PUD commission who started educating the public and the community about the importance of municipalization. So I don't know how long it's going to take. There's technical aspects to that, but there's also social and political aspects to that. So I am interested in having this increasingly on the community's awareness. And I feel that an open house is an excellent way to do that. And there are benefits for having this kind of a conversation in the middle of an election. I can understand some of your concerns. I tend to be less politically risk averse than some. So I understand the idea of that that some promises might be made in such a situation that put a responsibility on the PUD. But I see some advantages to certainly the we have in this community lots of examples of topics that came up during a political season that were to the benefit of the community, and topics that came up during a political season that were not to the benefit of the community. And I recognize that both are a possibility. So I'm not so stuck on the exact timing, but I do think that we need a process of ongoing communication with the public on this subject. And it's not just something, oh, we need to sit at our desks and keep working our pens and identify the supply. And although I'm, as an engineer, I love that kind of talk too. The point is though, we need to, at the same time, have a concurrent effort to be informing and educate the public and know that we are actively engaged in exploring possibilities. And we want the public to be informed about it. So that's kind of where I stand on the issue.
So what does that mean? Do you want to schedule something, or you want to put a pin in it till at least the fall?
I'd like to schedule something. I think I'd like us to be prepared to present something meaningful at it. Hopefully with some additional information, some additional insights. And I'm completely fine with spawning some additional investigation. For example, there was a study that we participated with the EES regarding supply of renewables. And what we got back is that it was going to be too expensive. And that's why we ended up really focusing on BP as a supplier of our energy. However, I'm interested in digging deeper, identifying other more creative power supply solutions, whether that's PowerX from Canada, or that's whatever. I want to continue to dig deep into supply options and look at some of the maybe higher risk pathways for supply. And at the same, another thing that I want to understand is what the tolerance of the consumer is for price. We know that a doubling of price is unacceptable. We know probably even a 20% increase in price, as our study projected, is probably a non-starter. But is a 2% acceptable? Is a 5% acceptable? This is another aspect that where we could explore and study to understand the end user's tolerance for trading near-term price impacts for all the other benefits of municipalization. There's lots for us to do and to stay engaged on. And I don't think it's just waiting for the tea leaves to move on our behalf.
Can I go next?
Yeah.
I think, so there was to me, it felt like there was a lot of enthusiasm and excitement in our community in like 2019 around doing some really bold things on climate change. And then COVID hit, and a lot of the kind of organizing around that fizzled, and understandably. And so I think when I think about another event or, convening another open house, I don't, just doing the Gary Saliba presentation again, I don't think is useful. And I think we're maybe, at least a tool, it sounds like you're in agreement on that. But what I think, things that I think could be useful for the community to hear about are like, maybe we bring someone from Jefferson County to have them explain their process. I know there was a study mission of a bunch of Whatcom County folks that were going to go to Jefferson County in the spring of 2020 to learn about what they did, and the trip got canceled because of COVID. So maybe bringing someone here is a good idea. I also think, in the Whatcom County Climate Impacts Advisory Committee, the group convened by Whatcom County, one of the things that came up again and again is how can we get a higher penetration of rooftop solar in Whatcom County, especially, this issue of transmission seems front and center. Everyone's talking about it. How do we get more, distributed energy resources? How do we use IRA, Inflation Reduction Act funding to do that? Again, in that meeting, Claire Fogelsong said, I said, one of our challenges with building new generation is that we don't have additional customers to buy the load. That's always been a challenge for us. And Claire said, well, we'll buy it from you. We've always said we would want to buy it. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that was true. I think we've gotten a lot of mixed messages from the city of Bellingham in terms of what role they want to play. So, I think there are a lot of opportunities that we could explore. I agree too with wanting to hear more from the community about what they want. This question of, if we did do a transition to public power and rates went up for a few years before they levelized, is that something that the community would tolerate if they got to own their system at the end of the day, but all that would take a lot of work. It would take facilitation, it would take coordination, figuring out who's coming from Jefferson County. So, I think that there is a benefit to having some sort of event in the future that's related to our community's clean energy future. But I think to make it sort of a dynamic, useful event, we're going to have to really put a lot of thought into how we do it and who we're partnering with. And I don't know that that's going to happen in the next few months. And it's going to, depending on how complex if it's just a speaker from Jefferson County, that's one thing. But, I think this is a really big topic, and it's something that I think is part of our strategic plan, but is also something we're going to need to get clear on, and then see, how much time Chris is going to need to help us do something like that, So I don't know. That's kind of my brain dump on it. That I think that we're ripe for sort of doing some sort of event in the community related to our clean energy future, but to me, it is not clear what that looks like yet, and it's going to take some more time to figure out.
Okay, yeah, and let's revisit this at the we'll get to talking. But sorry, go ahead, Jamie.
Yeah, I guess I have a brain dump too, just listening to the conversation. And Chris made a good point. He said, you know, if you do it in Bellingham, you know, especially during campaign season, you might get a lot of people, like a higher concentration of people there that are willing to go to public power no matter the cost. You know, and Commissioner Deshmani had mentioned, you know, what would be acceptable, you know, a 1% increase, a 5% increase. And I have a concern, and it's something that we need to think about is who goes to these town halls, right? Who is it? The mom, single mom with 3 kids that doesn't have childcare? Is she going to show up to a town hall? She's going to be the one, you know, most affected by a 5% increase. So how are we making this information equitable to the people that would be most impacted by a rate increase? Do you know what I mean? Like, and I don't want to lose those people in the conversation, because I've been those people, and I couldn't have made it to a town hall, and I still struggle to make it to town halls. So if we want to capture sort of public comment and public opinion about something so big, you know, 5% can really hurt a family. You know, so if we want to make that accessible, then we need to work on that. And it's not going to look like just a town hall.
No.
You know, so
Yeah.
that's something to think about also. And I think that we should put a pin in it until we you know, do a little more discovery on how we can really make this an equitable, fair process for people. Yeah, so let's I don't know when we should revisit it, but that's my opinion. It needs to be revisited down the road.
So let me propose this to the commission. This homework is not for Chris, it's for us.
Yep.
And so let's suggest a meeting maybe in a month or so where this goes back on the agenda. And then we all do some homework. So what do you all think? May, June, it's May now, so June or July, what do you think?
I think July would be better for me, and what I would see as my homework is reaching out to people like Ellen Murphy, who's the chair of the Climate Impacts Committee, talking to folks like Claire Fogelsong and Seth Vidania at the City of Bellingham. You know, I think Atul, you were part of this. We're not doing it at Western anymore, but the carbon hackathon, where, you know, maybe we need some sort of a community event that multiple agencies come together to do, where we have some speakers and then we have some roundtables where we get together and share ideas, and that does not, you know, that would be in addition to, I think, Jamie, what you're talking about is probably some sort of a, you know, professionally done poll or something where, you know, we do a survey that is done with professional survey design, so that we're sure that we get a, you know, representative cross-section of the community, and we ask some polling questions about the value of a publicly owned electricity system, rate, you know, what rate impacts could be versus what PSE's rate impacts might be, you know, things like that. So and I think we need to decide whether that's something that's worth putting funds toward, or if some of our other community partners could help fund that work too, like the City of Bellingham or Whatcom County. But I mean, I really think that this should probably, so I like your idea of doing homework on this and then circling back and maybe putting a longer chunk of time on our agenda for like later in July. That seems like a good idea to me.
Chris?
Well, I just want to point out that when you move to a larger customer base, when you establish retail customers, you've got to establish a rate system, which we do not have. And just as a reminder, there are all kinds of people that are looking at all kinds of different rate systems right now to address the problems, especially what Jamie raised as you know, a very current problem. And I would direct your attention towards the proposal that's down in California right now as an example of different things that can be done with rate systems. So, you know, I mean, in all of this stuff, you've got to look at the whole system, not just, you know, gosh, should we do it or not? But, you know, if you do it, there's a million different ways to allocate costs. And there's no law of physics that says this is how you have to do it. It's an accounting an accounting methodology that you adopt that assigns cost to certain rate classes, and that's how it all settles out. So with regards to low income, with regards to rooftop solar, all of that can be addressed through rates. I've done that in other utilities. I'd be delighted to walk you through how that works. But that again is just one slice of what we do if we move forward in that direction.
Thank you, Chris. Is there any more comment on the subject of the electric expansion feasibility study open house?
No, but I would like Chris to walk us through what he just offered. I'd like more information from you, Chris.
Okay, well, I had a rates study or rates presentation that I did for my last commission in Kentucky that walked them through all the different things you can and should do with rates, and it's based on some economic studies by a fellow named Bonbright, and I can direct you to the book, but it is definitely a cure for insomnia. So I'm not recommending it, but it's got some great stuff in it. Anyway, I can walk the commission through that. I would suggest a study session for that, just so that you understand what retail rates look like and what they do.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that.
Maybe that can be on the agenda in July. Yeah.
Well, when I've done this in the past, it's taken an hour to 90 minutes just to walk through it. So,
Maybe it's a special meeting then, yeah.
Yeah.
that's what I would suggest would be a study session.
Great. Anything else? Okay, let's move on to new business. The first item under new business is to approve an update to payroll and procedures policy.
Good morning, Commission. I am going to share my screen. We have, the SAO really likes it when we have policies. So a lot of times they suggest policies, basically, which are just an outline of how procedures work. So a number of years ago, they requested that we set up a payroll policy, and we did. Just kind of outlining where we get the information, how it works, how it flows, what the authorizations are that are involved. It was noticed that previously we had the Whatcom County process our payroll. And then a number of years ago, we moved to Paylocity, which offsite payroll system. But the policy had not been updated. So this is simply procedural. We updated the policy. The one thing I do want to point out is the copy that you received. It was noticed that it was not included of anybody like Steve Jilk. So I added this yellow highlighted paragraph to the policy that just basically addresses the special contract employees that we have, which Steve is kind of the only one we have currently. So basically, it's just an update to a current policy we wanted to get before you. So any questions on that?
No,
Can you read that? I can read it out loud if it's too small.
Looks great on my end.
yeah.
Okay.
So you'll need a motion to approve the update to the payroll and procedures policy as presented.
Is there a motion?
I move we update the process for payroll as presented.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And the motion passes. So I think, Annette, you can hand the ball off to yourself for item 6B.
I do. I get all the new items this meeting. So this again is pretty just procedural, but we kind of kick up our budget season with proposing out there what our budget schedule is going to be for the year. So it kind of lays out what we expect, when it's going to happen, when you guys can expect the presentations and the meetings and the work sessions on that. So it's basically the same schedule as we've had in the last several years, adjusted a day or two here or there to hit commission meeting dates. But it does include work sessions, like I said, presentations and customer meetings.
And the schedule will work as long as we don't municipalize between now and the end of the year.
Or exercise your taxing authority,
Exactly.
because you have to have your budget to the auditor much sooner if you exercise taxing authority, so.
And there's no plan for that.
No.
Just making sure Jack knows.
I'll make a motion to approve the 2024 budget development schedule.
A second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you.
So that's it for new business. Let's move on to the general manager's report.
So commissioners, I only have one thing I want to talk about today, and it's a real minor administrative thing, but when you turn in an expense account, and this goes for staff as well, make sure that the original receipts are attached, not a photocopy, not a photograph of the originals themselves. And we need that in order to process those parts of the claim. If the receipts are with regards to a meal, it also has to comply with our meal size policy and our tipping policies. So just make sure that happens, or we're not going to be able to approve it. And then last, we're really doing a lot of travel this year, and I don't know, Annette could speak on it better than I could, but probably more than we had planned. So I would just like to remind commissioners that, especially when there are short duration meetings that are out of town, that Zoom is always a good cost-effective option. I realize that in many cases you want to have the rubbing of elbows and the hobbing of knobs and all that, but the issue is going to be that it just costs money. And especially when you've got a 2-hour meeting in some place that requires an overnight stay, I would urge all the commissioners to look at that and just do the virtual option and go that way instead. So enough of a lecture for me. That's it for the GM report for this month, or this week. I'm sorry. I'd like to turn it over to Brian for our operations report.
Morning, commissioners. I could spend all day talking about power supply dynamics in the western region, but I won't do that today. I just have a couple items, both related to our water systems. One is the Grandview system. What we're seeing there, and it's good news, really. We're seeing an uptick in permitting activity in the Grandview area, permitting for new facilities to be located on property that we serve with our potable water and fire systems. And particularly in the I-5 industrial area on the east side of I-5. So, that means we're looking forward at our infrastructure, what we have to do to connect these new customers. And it really brings a focus on the existing state of our infrastructure. And one of the things you'll see going forward, and it'll be reflected in the budget, is that our potable water system, there are upgrades we need to do to make sure we can provide reliable service to those customers. And that includes water storage and perhaps even a new well for potable water. So, as I said, we'll be bringing that to you in the future. The other thing is we're realizing coming out of COVID that we have real clunky communications with both Whatcom County or the city of Ferndale when it comes to permitting, and also Fire District 7 in terms of, they are the agency that responds for fire life safety issues in the Grandview area. And so it's just a reminder that we've got to reestablish those communication lines and get a heads up on when new facilities are being permitted, so we're ready to go when the permitting is approved. The other thing I'll mention is the industrial water system. And this is based on some recent activity that's going on. We're revisiting the issue of storage, water storage, because as you are probably aware, the design of our industrial water system is such that every one of our customers is served by a radial water line. There's no storage anywhere in our system. And so what happens when there is activity on the customer side, if they do a rapid increase in the amount of water they take, or a rapid decrease in the amount of water they take, it immediately affects our entire system, both in terms of flow water, pressures on the system, our pumps ramp up and down. And so you're going to see discussion in the future again on water storage, if not on our side of the fence, then an encouragement for our customers to put water storage on their side of the fence. Recent activity, like I said, we've really gotten slammed from a source that wasn't a problem in the past. So with that, I'll stop. See if you have any questions. Thank you.
I guess I have a question, and that's regarding the growth of the customer base for Grandview. Will require investment, but in the long haul, it's still a big win for us because of because if we have significantly growth in customers, it will allow us to pay off all the historical sunk investment as well. I mean, in the business of infrastructure, the more customers you have per capacity, the better. Is that a fair statement?
I would support that statement, Commissioner. In the past at Grandview, we were getting into a real issue where the customer base was stagnant. We weren't adding anybody. In fact, a couple of cases, we lost customers. At the same time, we were having to make investments in the infrastructure just to support that customer base. So yes, in this case, I would say growth is a good thing.
Do we understand anything about what the conditions are for that growth and how, if we have any role in that, or if there are things we can do to support growth in that water system?
I don't know there's anything we can, well, we do support it with the infrastructure, but it's happening organically. We're seeing, as elsewhere in the Ferndale area, storage facilities seem to be a huge thing right now. As growth, residential growth increases, the apartments that are going in on Portalway, et cetera, they need to store their stuff somewhere because they can't store it all in their units. So a tremendous growth in storage facilities in Grandview, Portalway, et cetera. That's
okay.
Quick
Commissioner Grant?
question, and maybe you all mentioned this in the last forgetting, but have we looked into this $221 million available for infrastructure construction grants through the Public Works Board?
Yes, Commissioner, we are looking at that. One of the challenges for us is that typically those funds are targeted for systems that serve residential customers. Also, they're looking at wastewater, water quality issues. We don't have those issues. We're a light industrial area, so it's a little more challenging to secure funding for those facilities, but we are looking into it actively.
Great.
And in fact, we will, if we have to upgrade our potable system, that'll be one of the sources of funding that we will try to tap.
Great, and I'm glad that we calculated those numbers for the jobs supported at the Grandview industrial area, because I think numbers like that do make more compelling grant application. So
yeah, that and the comprehensive plan that we recently completed with Dave Olson's help really facilitates that as well. That's a background document that will help us in the funding application process.
Let's move on to commissioner reports.
I can go first. I had a great afternoon at the first salmon ceremony out at the Lummi Nation on Thursday. Then later that evening, I presented at the Whatcom Climate Impacts Advisory Committee. Also went to the YRO1 Environmental Caucus annual gathering. So it's great that so many of these events that have been canceled for multiple years or virtual are now in person. It makes such a big difference, in terms of relationships. So kind of looking ahead, I am headed to the Tri-Cities again today for my role on the Energy Northwest Board of Directors. And I'm going to be carpooling with Representative Alex Randall from the 40th Legislative District. And we'll be meeting with Representative Stephanie Barnard, who's a Republican from the Tri-Cities that's very involved in clean energy projects. And she will be joining the tour of the Columbia River Generating Station that we'll be doing tomorrow with several other members of the executive board and the board of directors. So looking forward to learning more about that facility and kind of developing a deeper kind of continuing to get to know staff better at Energy Northwest. And that is all covered by Energy Northwest, not our ratepayers, just so you all know. And then Thursday, but I will be charging, so that's a per diem for Wednesday, and then Thursday I'll be participating in this US government listening session related to the Columbia River Basin. So those are kind of my two per diems coming up, and I will also, just a reminder, will not be at the June 13th commission meeting.
I don't have a lot to report. I had a great meeting with my Waputa mentor, Deborah Lester from Kitsap County last week, the week before. I lose time. I think the mentorship program is really great. I love that I'm able to bounce ideas off of Deborah and hear opinions because we can't collaborate together. It's wonderful. I've also, in the future, I would like to plan a meeting with Anne to discuss her work over the last few months on social media. I've reached out to a few communication directors from other public, public school districts and cities that are doing social media programs, and have learned from them about their retention. But anyway, I would like to talk to Anne about that. And then Chris, I'd love to schedule something with you when you're ready to talk about the mechanics of our social media program. So nothing, no per diems yet.
So I also attended the first salmon ceremony, and I talked already about some of the things that came out of that. Also the environmental caucus meeting. Of course, I attended the PPC in the last 2 weeks, and that was also quite informative. That the main takeaway from the PPC meetings was I think I already talked about it at our last regular meeting. This next week, I'm one of the things that I express is a desire to not travel to Tacoma for perms. And so I won't be traveling, but I will be having a meeting with either both Chris and Annette or just Annette to talk about the issues that happen at perms, and so that I can stay involved on behalf of the commission on risk management, but not have to be the designated person to be down there. And but I will attend this next week's perms meeting remotely to make sure that to kind of support the transition process. What I envision is that eventually what I will do is just have them have a every other month or so check in with staff on risk management. And I think my time will be better used that way rather than attending the perms meetings myself. So
Did we ever, can Annette go to those meetings instead of you, or?
Yeah, Annette can represent the PUD.
Right.
Annette and Chris can represent the PUD at those meetings.
Yeah, at the board of directors meeting, it's a combination of electeds and GMs typically. And then there's a separate financial section that Annette always attends. My understanding is that's the mechanics of it. But, you know, again, we're a small organization. So if Atul or any commissioner is attending firms, I will not be. And my expectation would be the reverse. If I'm attending, that I would be the representative there and nobody else would be spending their time on it. Other than.
Yeah, and I think part of our practice here on this particular subject was, I mean, the commissioner that I replaced was an expert on risk management. So, I mean, he ran an insurance company, so he was, whether he would like to call himself that or not, he is de facto an expert on risk management, so I'm sure he added a lot of value in that capacity. I dove into this role with both feet. Attempted my darndest to increase my competency in the subject. And I'm certainly less uninformed than I was. I think that this is the best way for us to manage it going forward is for, and maybe we can adjust our, for next year, you know, exactly how we just designate roles a bit, maybe more of a person that's looking at risk management, but doesn't need to go to the PERMS meeting. So anyway, something to think about for the future, but that's my commissioner update. So ready to move on to there's no questions. We move on to the public comment. So if you're in the room, please come up to the mic. And if you're online, just raise your hand. We have comments happening here in the meeting room.
Yes, I had a couple related to the Snake River dams. One thing that I don't think gets mentioned, but not nearly enough emphasis, is that while the dams don't provide a lot of seasonal storage, they have a large amount of diurnal storage, and as such, they are very useful for shaping renewables. And in fact, I believe that's basically the way that Bonneville is using those dams at this point, as opposed to baseload. The other thing that related to that for fish, one of the things I've not heard mentioned, but needs to be looked at in this whole discussion about fish runs on the Snake River and elsewhere, is that should look at working with the North Pacific Andromeda Fish Commission about having them modify their rules to increase escapement, allowing more fish into the rivers in the first place rather than being harvested on the North Pacific.
Thank you. Any comments online? Okay, I don't see any. So with no further comments, we'll close the public comment period. We have a executive session where we are covering 3 items. Water rights, a condemnation issue, as well as a review of the general manager. So we expect on that, you've got 25
We
minutes.
have
But
25 minutes. For my end of the litigation adjudication matter, 5 minutes, although you had something to bring up. But mine would be no more than 5 minutes. The condemnation matter is 5 minutes again on my side, probably, unless there's a lot of discussion. And then the evaluation, and I'll turn control over when the evaluation goes over. I'll let Chris be the soon manager.
So we're estimating then, should we say
25.
30 minutes? Let's say 30 minutes. I think we'll want 30 minutes.
We take a 5-minute break before we start.
Yeah, so it's 5 after approximately, and let's start